All right, everyone, Zoom is still all right? Excellent. All right, Shabbos, good morning. Let us begin. We have, Baruch Hashem, a number of sponsors today. To thank all of our sponsors, to thank our Talmud Torah sponsors. To thank our Talmud Torah sponsors for the month of Kislev. To thank Josh and the Neshama of Nachum Sender ben Meshulam should have an aliyah and a someone who assigns his portion to the Nasi versus someone who assigns his portion to a Hedyot. Shakosev l'Nasi in tzarech l'zakos, lehedyot tzarech l'zakos. If you assign your portion to the Nasi, you do not need a third party to help with the transference. You don't need someone to acquire on behalf of the Nasi, but ultimately, again, you would need a third party to help with a Hedyot. Again, I will say, we'll see in the Gemara, ultimately, again, what all of this means. V'cham say, echazeh v'echazeh, tzrichin lezakos. Chacham say no. If you want to assign your ownership interest in any of the city properties, you need to do that ultimately again through a third party. Lo dibru b'nasi ela b'hove. The only reason they brought up a nasi was because Rabbi say it was most common in these type of situations to assign your portion to the nasi. Rabbi Yehuda says, Ein anshe Galil tzricha lichtov. The people of Galil do not need to assign their portion to the Nasi. Why? Shekvar kasvu avosein al yedehen. Because their forefathers already went ahead and assigned their individual portions in the city over to the Nasi. All right, so I'll say we have to make sense of what the Mishnah exactly is talking about. So here we go. Says the Gemara, Amai Mitzar. So we'll say, so here's what's interesting. So when you read the Mishnah, this is why I didn't read the Ran, because the Ran explains the Gemara, but let's see the Gemara first. So we'll say, when you see this Lashon over here, Hakosev Chalko L'Nasi, what that sounds like is, it's like another case. Hakosev Chalko L'Nasi means someone who assigns his portion to the Nasi is Aser. So the Gemara says, I don't understand, why is assigning my portion to the Nasi Aser? What does that mean? To which the Gemara says, no. Amrav Sheishes Hachi Katani. This is what it means. Umat Takanasan. I'll say, watch this. Here's how to read the Mishnah. So the Mishnah is talking about a case of what, or I should say the second case of the Mishnah was talking about a case of, actually third case of the Mishnah, where Reuven and Shimon say, Harini alayich va'at alai. Right? Reuven can't get Hana from Shimon. Shimon can't get Hana from Reuven. So we'll say, what did the Mishnah tell me? In a situation like that, halacha l'maisa. So what's their status? What's their status vis-a-vis city property? Assuming that Reuven and Shimon live in the same city, what's their status? Can't get benefit from it. Right? Why? Because both Reuven and Shimon own an interest in city property. So therefore, again, Reuven can't get Hana from city property. And again, we defined it, we'll say, what are examples of city property? The city square, the bathhouse, the shul, the Aron Kodesh, and the Svarim. So remember again, so Reuven can't get benefit from any of those items because then he's getting benefit from Shimon. Shimon can't get benefit from any of those items because he'll be benefiting from Reuven. So now the Mishnah says, Rabbi, so what should they do? You know what they could do? They could assign their respective ownership interests essentially back to the mayor, right? That was what we call the Nasi, right? They could assign their ownership interest back to the Nasi. By doing that, they have essentially each of them relinquished their individual ownership within these city areas, and therefore they could both benefit. So Reuven takes his ownership interest, assigns it to the Nasi. Shimon takes his ownership interest, assign it to the Nasi. Now each of them have the ability to benefit from all of the fixtures or all of the aspects of the city. Incredible. So yichtavu chelkon l'nasi. So we'll say, so that's it. That's the whole chap of the Mishnah. So then there's machlokes. Is it just the Nasi? Is it someone else? Does it require a third party? But that's the chap. Essentially, assign your ownership interest back to the city. That's what you're doing when you're assigning it to the Nasi. Assign it back to the city. That way everyone has the ability to go ahead and benefit. I will say the parentheses are just a restating of the Mishnah. Nothing is, and we could just skip. So I will say, so skip to the two dots now. You can skip the entire parentheses. Rabbi Huda says, Ein anshe galil tzrichen lezakos shekvar kasu avosin al yedehen. So I will say it's actually quite interesting. So remember again. So the Mishnah now tells me if Reuven and Shimon go ahead and get into they engage in mutual isser. Right, mutual Nedarim, so neither can benefit from the other. So again, they can't benefit from certain jointly owned city things. Remedy for that, assign your ownership interest to the Nasi. Then the Mishnah says the people of Galil do not have to assign their ownership interest. Why not? Why not? Because their forefathers already did it for them. Okay, so what does that mean? So we'll say, this is fascinating. Yehuda Omer, Ein Anshil Galil, Tzrichen Lezakos. The people of Galil do not need to assign their ownership interest to the Nasi. Why not? Shekvar kasvu avosein al yedein. Because their forefathers already did this for them. We'll say, watch this. Tanya, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, Anshe Galil kantarin hayu. I will say the people of Galil were quarrelsome people. And what would happen as a result? Vahayu nodrin hana'a zemizeh. So this is great. So the people of Galil were exceptionally quarrelsome people. And what were they doing? They were always making Nedarim to aser hana'a on each other. So I will say, so because this was a commonplace thing, what happened? Now remember, when you live in a city and city property is jointly owned, you get into a fight with someone, the reaction is a neder. It creates problems each and every day. So what happened? So the Gemara says, V'hayu nodrin hana'a zemizeh, and they would get into a fight. So they would go ahead and aser hana'a one to the other. Amdu avoseyem. The kasvu chalkeihem lenasi. So we'll say, so what happened? So their forefathers got up and ultimately, again, wrote their portion to the Nasi. So essentially, in the Galil, they legislated this. What they essentially did was they said, townspeople don't really own city property. The city owns city property. That way, when you get into a fight with your fellow Galilean, right? Ultimately, again, you aser hana one from the other. It doesn't impede either of you from going ahead and using city property. Pretty incredible. Good. So we'll say, fine. So that's good. I'm doing good. Good. End of the sugya. Mishnah. So we've actually seen this before. We've seen this case before. We've actually seen this entire Mishnah referenced before, actually, a number of times. I will say this is the famous case of Beis Choron that we've mentioned so many times. Here is the Mishnah. So here we go. So we'll say, so now watch this case. So what happens? I go ahead and just so you understand the way the Lashon is, if a person is prohibited to get benefit from his friend. So the case over here is Ruvain makes a neder, prohibiting Shimon from getting benefit from him. Okay, so now Shimon can't get benefit, can't get hana from Ruvain. Ve'ein lo ma yochal. But now what's the problem? Shimon has nothing to eat. So what do we do in such a scenario like this? Nosno la'achar l'shum matana, v'hala muterba. So we've seen this already before. What can you do? So the easiest thing to do in a situation like this is Ruvain could give the food to a third party. So Reuven gives the food to Levi, right? Who's an unrelated party. Now the food belongs to Levi, and what? And now Shimon has the ability, and Levi could give it to Shimon, right? Why could Levi give it to Shimon? Because the food has nothing to do with Reuven anymore. Now we'll say, remember again, we already saw this concept before. In fact, remember, we'll say a couple of Mishnayos ago, this was the part that everyone agreed on, right? Where did it get a little bit contentious? Where did it get a little bit dicey, right? When we got up to a situation of Hefker, what happens if there's not a third party there, right? Machlok is again Rabbanan and Rabbi Yossi about how the mechanics of Hefker actually work. But again, this is the straightforward case. Ruvain made a neder. Shimon, you can't get any benefit from me. Shimon has no food. Ruvain wants to give him food. Ruvain can't give it directly to Abihana. Ruvain could give it to Levi, third party, and third party could give it to Shimon, Shalom Yisrael. Here we go. Maisa, be'echad, bebeis charon. I will say, by the way, we've been quoting this case literally since the beginning of the Masechta. So we'll say, so here it is. So there was a story of a guy in Beis Charon, and what happened? Shahaya Aviv, now we'll say it's changed over here. It's changed over here to Mudar. Shahaya Aviv Mudar, not Nodar. Shahaya Aviv Mudar Heimeno Hana. Meaning, so we'll say, so what happened? There was a son and a father. The son had made a neder that his father can't get benefit from him. Or we'll say it could also be that the father made the neder not to get benefit from the son. So whoever made the neder is somewhat irrelevant. The point over here is there was a father and son in Beis Charon, and the father was not permitted to get any benefit from the son. Okay, now we'll say what was happening. V'hayamasi espino. The problem is son was marrying off his son, right? So son wants his father to be at the chasana of grandson. What's the problem? The problem is father is under a neder not to get benefit from the son. So what do we do in a situation like this? So son says, so we'll say we have three characters over here. We've got father, son, and grandson, right? So just to get our characters straight, right? So again, father made a neder not to get benefit from the son. Son is marrying off grandson, who's the son's son, but we're just going to call him grandson for this purpose over here, right? So son is marrying off grandson, wants his father very much to be present at the chasana. Father can't be present at the chasana because father is under a neder not to benefit from son. So what does son do? So what happens? So son says to his friend. So now we've got father, son, grandson, and friend, right? So son says to his friend, so Amr l'chavero, chater sudan nisunin heinan lefanecha, ele kidei sheyavo abba v'yochel imanu b'seuda. So what says very interesting. So son says to his friend, I'm hereby giving over to you the following. I'm giving over the chatzar, so the hall, right? The chatzar, the courtyard where the seuda is going to take place. This seuda, the food, everything is given over to nisunin heinan lefanecha. It's given over before you. But so it will say, watch what happens in this case. Son is explicit. What does son say? I'm giving this over to you so that my father could participate in the seuda. That's how I'm giving this to you. In other words, it's not because I like you. It's not because I feel that, I'm sure I like you, right? But it's not because, again, I want to definitely give you something. I'm giving you this in order to circumvent the neder. I want my father to be able to come to the chasana, partake in the chasana. So I'm giving you everything now for you to own, in order that my father could come. Okay, friend says, sure, no problem. Then what happened? Friend turns around, Amar, im shalihem, harehem mukdashim l'shamayim. Be careful how you choose your friends, right? So what does the friend do? So I'll say, you'll see what his logic was. They're going to say, fine, you know what? If it's mine, by the way, I just want to let you know, if it's mine, I'm making it hegdish. Amrle, so son says back to friend, Nasati lecha et shali shekdishon shamayim. Do you think I gave you the properties that you should be makdish? I didn't give you the property to be makdish. I told you I gave you the property. I gave you the property because I want my father to come to the chasana. That's what I want. And that's the only reason I'm giving you the property. Amrlo is supposed to say, so what does friend say? Amrlo, nasatili es shelcha, ella, I'm sorry, Amrlo, nasatili es shelcha, ella shete ata va'avicha, ochlin v'shosin, umisrasin zelazeh. So the friend says, you know what? I know what you did. You only gave me the property so that you and your father should be able to eat and drink together. Right? Be hampered with one another. The avon taloi barosho. And literally the sin should hang on my head. And I will say, just to be clear, friend wasn't really committing a sin. In other words, but he was saying was, you're using me to circumvent the prohibition. So the friend did not appreciate being used in this fashion. He said, I know exactly what you're doing, right? You're just using me. You're not really giving me a gift. You're not really giving me ownership. You're giving this to me so that technically speaking, it's not yours, that you and your father could come and have a good time. But in reality, you're just using me to circumvent the neder. So the friend was upset. That's why the friend said, ultimately, again, if it's really mine, I'm going to go ahead and be makadesh it. So the Gemara says, so this is interesting case here. Because remember again, what I want to point out is interesting over here is, here son is explicit about the reason he's giving the gift. Right? In other words, he doesn't hide it. And this is very important because he doesn't hide, right? He doesn't try to pretend, no, it's a real gift. He doesn't pretend why he's giving it. He's clear and explicit why he's giving it in order to go ahead and circumvent the neder. The friend does not appreciate being a pawn in this entire process of circumventing the neder. So listen to this. Second wide line of Osemem Chesam Adal. So the Chazal said, Komatana she'ina shemigdisha te mikudeshes eina matana. Allah said is incredible. So this yields a very important metric. How do you know if a matana is a real matana? The Bible says if the recipient of the matana has the ability to make the matana hekdesh, that's a real matana. If you don't have the ability to make the matana hekdesh, then it's a shem matana. So we'll say, what does that really mean? In other words, the ability to make something hekdesh requires what? Complete ownership. So what it's saying is, if you have enough ownership to make the item hekdesh, then that is a valid bona fide matana. If it's a matana and you don't have the rights to make it hekdesh, then at the end of the day, that's not a matana. That's really just a legal fiction that somebody's employing in order to be able to get around something. Incredible. So we'll say, let's analyze this a bit more. So Maisa Lister, so we'll say, here's the problem, right? The problem we'll say is, the Mishnah espouses a concept, right? What's the concept? If someone is not permitted to get a neder, to get hana from you, right? Reuven made a neder that Shimon can't get hana from him. Now what happens? In the Mishnah's case, Shimon has nothing to eat. So what could Reuven do? Give the food to a third party. So the Mishnah sounds like what it's saying is, whenever Shimon is not permitted to go in and get benefit from Reuven could circumvent the neder by giving the food to a third party. The Mishnah then seemingly tells a story of what? Someone who did just that. But yet, what does the Mishnah say? Based on the story doesn't work. So the story seems to contradict the principle. Right? The principle is when there's a neder, there's a way to circumvent the neder, the Isser Hana, by giving the item to a third party. And then the story seems to indicate that process doesn't work. So what's going on over here? So this is incredible. So the Gemara says, Maisa Lister, Kisur Mechsa. Rabbi say, by the way, there's nothing like starting a Monday with a Chisrei Mechsera, right? It's like the jackpot, Talmudic jackpot. It's so exciting. What's going to come next? Chisrei Mechsera v'achi katani. Here we go. So we'll say, here's the missing piece. So we'll say it works. Einachinami. If Reuven made a neder that Shimon can't get benefit from him, right? And now Reuven wants to convey something to Shimon. How could Reuven convey something to Shimon? How could he do it? Give it to Levi. Give it to a third party. Now watch this. Here's the caveat. V'mochiach sofo al tchilaso aser. Oh, okay. So we'll say, now watch this. However, now we'll say, if you take a look over here, take a look in mochiach in the Ran. 2, 4, 6, 8 lines are from the bottom. V'mochiach sofo al tchilaso shochiach soch dvarav al tchilasan. So I will say, if at the end of the day, literally, the end illuminates or clarifies the beginning, she'enon elaha rama ukigom matnas beis charon. So I will say, essentially the Gemara is saying is like this. It's true. You can gift property to a third party, in order to go ahead and get it to Shimon. Reuven could gift it to a third party to get it to Shimon. However, in order for that to work, the gift has to be a real gift. If it's clear that the gift is not a real gift, but it's only to totally, wholly, and fully circumvent the neder, then einachinami, the gift will not work. What's an example, ultimately, again, of a sham gift? What's the example? The story in the Mishnah. The story in Beis Charon, where again, so I'll say, so that's what it's saying, ba'achas to have a sofa mochiach al tchilaso. And I will say, so now what the Mishnah says is like this. Einachinami, if Reuven made an neder that Shimon can't benefit from him, and now Shimon has nothing to eat, so can Reuven go ahead and convey ownership of an item to Levi? Yes, as long as what? It's an absolute gift. But if it's not an absolute gift, what we say, sofa mochiach al tchilaso, which means you're able to see from the context that the gift is not a legitimate gift. It's just not a legitimate gift, then it's not going to work. What's an example of an illegitimate gift? A sham gift? That'll be the Beis Charon gift, straw gift, right? That'll be the example of Beis Charon. Where I both say again. Now let's understand why the case in Beis Charon is considered to be a sham gift. So here we go. Amar Rava, lo shana ela da amar lei v'hinan lefanecha ela kedei sheyavo abba. Rava says, when is it a sham gift? It's a sham gift when it's explicit, right? Or we'll say, when in this case, for example, son says to friend, I'm hereby conveying to you as a gift the chatzar, all of the food, in order for me to be able to invite my father. Okay, so we'll say, when you say it, then it's clear that the whole thing is a sham. Now watch this. Ha'aval Amarle shehu lefanecha sheyava abba midaitcha huda amarle. So let's listen to this. What happens if son conveys the property to a friend, and he says, "Here, I'm giving you the chatzar, I'm giving you the food. Perhaps you would consider inviting my father." So Rabbi say, Rava posits that's okay. Why is that okay? Rabbi saying, because in that case, son is not explicitly saying that's the reason he's giving the gift, right? Son is ultimately leaving it up to the decision of friend. You see, Rabbi say in the first case, if you notice the difference in the wording over here, in the first case, son is conveying ownership of the chatzar and of all of the food. And what is he saying? All of this is for you. And I'm only doing this so that my father should be able to come to the chasana. Rava says that's a straw gift, right? That's a fiction gift, and it doesn't work. Conversely, if the son says, I'm giving you everything, perhaps you would consider, right? It's yours, you could do with it as you want, but perhaps you would consider, now that you have this, inviting my father to partake. In that case, I will say, if you notice, the gift is not predicated on the attendance of the father, nor is the attendance of the father in and of itself part of the fabric of the gift. What son is saying now to friend is, if now that you own this, perhaps you would consider inviting my father. Rava says that would be an appropriate gift. Lishnachrina, Rava says an alternate version of this. Lishnachrina Armina la, Amar Rava, lo tema taima da Amar le v'hinan lefanecha hu da aser. Aval Amar le hein lefanecha sheyava abba v'yochal mutar. So we'll say, so in this alternate version, don't think it's just because he made it explicitly linked to the gift that it's aser. But if he would say, here friend, here's the property, perhaps you would consider inviting my father, it's mutar. Ella, afilu amar le hein lefanecha yava abba v'yochal aser. We'll say in this alternate version, even if son says to friend, here's the gift, perhaps you would consider inviting my father. The gift is an invalid gift. Why? My taima sudaso muchachas alav. So we'll say why? Because the mention ultimately again of the father indicates that the whole thing is a sham. So we'll say, look what we have over here. We have two versions of Rava. In version 1 of Rava, the problematic gift is one in which you explicitly say you're only giving the gift so that the father could come to the Suda. But if you give the gift and then recognizing that friend is the owner of the gift, so son says, perhaps you would consider inviting my father, that is a proper gift. In second version of Rava, any mention of the father coming to the Su'udah in the context of giving the gift makes it a fictitious gift. In order for the gift to be valid, it has to be a gift without any mention of the father coming to the Su'udah, right? Give the gift. After the gift is given, you want to follow up with friend and ask him to invite your father, that's absolutely fine. But Lamaisa, father cannot be mentioned in the context of the gift, because if he is what we call sudasa muchachas alav, that at the end of the day it's clear that the only reason he's giving the gift is to kind of circumvent the neder, and that's going to be problematic. So I will say this is really quite interesting, because what we begin to see according to, so again, two different versions of Rava. Good. Amud Beis. Let's go back there. Hu Gavra. We'll say interesting cases. So we'll say what we don't. So here's what we know. We don't know the halacha l'mais yet, which Emir Hashem we will see. But here's what we know. We know that in the case where Ruvain made a neder, that Shimon can't get benefit from him, there is a way for Ruvain to get food to Shimon. Shimon doesn't have food. How does Ruvain get food to Shimon? To Levi. He gives it to Levi. Now, both say what's interesting and now what's coming out is Ruvain saying something to Levi when he gives the gift to Levi or not? Now, the Mishnah doesn't include anything. The problem is now that we brought up the case of Beis Charon, the case of Beis Charon, I'll say, ultimately, again, is a case of gift giving to circumvent a neder. And what seems to be problematic over here is when you give the gift and you are explicit about the reason you're giving the gift, then it becomes a straw gift, a sham gift, and the whole thing is void. The tension over here is, what are you allowed to mention in the context of the gift or not? And this is the two versions of Rava. Can you make any mention of the father, not make a mention of the father? So that's the tension over here. Again, unresolved. We'll come back to it in just a bit. Ho Gavra, let's listen to this case. It's very interesting. Ho Gavra, Tahavile Bra, Tavi Shamit Kipi Dikisna. Suppose a father had a son. The son was always stealing bundles of flax. This was an at-risk teen in the times of the Gemara, right? So again, he was stealing bundles of flax. So what happened? The father got very upset. So what happened? So the father asserted his property upon his son, made a neder that my son cannot get any benefit from my property. So the Gemara says, Amrulei, v'havi bar barach tzor merabanan mai. So this is very interesting. So it says, now the father essentially said, my son cannot benefit from any of my property, including about say, when I die, my son's not going to inherit me. That's what this father was saying. He was so upset at his son for his thieving ways that ultimately, again, I'm not allowing him to get any benefit from anything. Okay, so they said to the father, but one second. What happens if your grandson becomes a Talmid Chacham? Right? In other words, what happens if your grandson ultimately, again, changes his ways, becomes a little bit better, or a lot better, becomes Talmid Chacham? Wouldn't you want your grandson to be able to inherit your property? So the Gemara says, so we'll say, so by the way, just before we go on, so if you take a look, you see the Ran, Divrei HaMaschil, Amrulei, second line in the top of the Ran. If you skip a little bit in that Ran, in the short lines, 2, 4, 6, 8 lines in. So actually, just keep it simple. 8 lines into the short lines of the Ran. 8 lines into the short lines of the Ran. So look what he writes over here. The Ran just clarifies the case. Yesh Lomar, Tahach uvda hachi avi. So I'll say, the Ran says, by the way, I have to give you the rest of the family history in this case over here. Here's the case. Tilahu Gavra, Havlu Trey Bunny. I will say, this father had 2 sons. Father in this case had 2 sons. Chad Demali, right, one who was a good boy. V'idach Tahavishamet Kifi Dikisna. And the other one who was stealing bundles of flax. right? So 2 kids, right? One the thief and one the good kid. So that's what happens. They kirubo davebai lemisfinu lenachase lahu demali umishum hachi amrulei. So what was going to happen? The father essentially was going to cut the thief's son out of his will. He just wasn't going to give him anything, and he was going to give everything to the other son. So Amrulei, so they said to the father, Ihava bar barach sur merabanan lama lo yiske benachasim. Shabbos says, here was the problem. So they said to the father, you're cutting out the thief's son from all of your property, but what happens if the thief's son has a son who's a Talmid Chacham? So your grandson then will be a righteous man. Wouldn't you want your grandson to have some of your property? Shapir kamrisu. So what I said that's what's happening over here. That's the story. So now back to the Gemara. So what I said, what happened? So Amr Lahon. So the father said, you know what? It's a good point. Likni hadain v'havi bar bereitzor mirabana liknie. So therefore, I will say, what does the father say? What does the father say? So the father essentially says, look, I'm going to go ahead and give half of my property to the good son, right? The other half of the property, I want my thief son to hold on to. And if I have a grandson who's a Talmid Chacham, the property should go to him. If I don't have a grandson who's a Talmid Chacham, I want the other half to go to who? To my good son. So essentially what's happening in this case is father is saying, thief son, you could hold half of the estate. Ultimately, again, in the event that you have a son who's a Talmid Chacham, I'm not giving it to you. I'm giving it to you to hold for a grandson. And if the grandson is Talmid Chacham, give it to him. If there's no Talmid Chacham grandson, I want that the part of the estate to go to my other son who's living on the right path. So you can finish up the round now. He says, "V'hadlei shaper kamrisu likni adein palga v'hava breitzor mirabon likni berei lahu palga v'ilo lehava kulu lebrach dema'ali." So we'll say, does such a gift work like this? So we'll say, see what's happening over here? So now, father, once again, has 2 sons. Thief, good kid, right? So now he wants to go ahead and give everything to his good kid. His friends say, but 1 second. What happens if thief has a son who's a Talmid Chacham? You wouldn't want him to lose out. Father says, good point. Let me give 50% of my estate to my good kid. Right? The other 50%, thief kid, you hold on to it. If you have a son who's a Talmid Chacham, it goes to him. If you don't have a son who's a Talmid Chacham, I want you to give it to your brother, right? To good kid. By the way, they must have had incredible shalom in this family as well. Really, everyone got along. So the Gemara says, Mai. So we'll say, so what do you do? Mai, what do you do in such a situation? So Amri Pumbedusai, Kani Amanas Lahaknosu. Wow. So we'll say that Pumbedusai said, it's a classic case of Kani Amanas Lahaknosu. They both say there's a concept in halacha of telling someone to acquire something, but lamaisa, you don't really want them to acquire it. You only want them to acquire it in that you need them to convey it to someone else. So both say, watch what's happening in this case. So father is saying to thief's son, I'm giving you 50% of my estate. I want you to hold it, acquire it, but not to own it. I'm just giving it to you so that in the event that you have a son who's a Talmid Chacham, you could go ahead and give it to him. This is what's called Kani Almanas Lahaknos. Acquire it, not to own it. Acquire it on the condition ultimately again to convey it. And the Gemara says, V'chal Kani Almanas Lahaknos, Lo Kani. So the Pumbedisai say, I will say any case of Kani Almanas Lahaknos does not work. Now I will say, the Ran says something fascinating over here. Just quickly, the Ran writes that if you look, we'll say it's in the short lines, the bolded phrase Amri Pumpa Disai Kani Amanas Laknos Lo Kani Ta'afagav de Matana Amanas Lahachsir Shma Matana. Now we'll say the Ran says fascinating. There is a concept in halacha of a Matana Amanas Lahachsir, which is I give a gift on the condition that you give the item back. There's a concept like this. Let's give you a simple example. I have a watch. You want to borrow my watch, right? You want to borrow my watch, right? You have a chasana or something. So I give you my watch. I'm giving you as a gift on the condition that you give it back to me. That works. Naran says over here, Hasam shayni de mikomaka mahari hu zocheba l'shaito or mishtamish mimenu aval hacha de lo ikni le lebrei. So we'll say. The Ran says, in the case of Matana Amanas Lahachzir, the whole chap is, during that duration of the gift, you own it. You're going to have to give it back, But Lamaisa, during the duration of the gift, you own it. In this case, Rabbosai, father is saying to thief, son, you don't own it. You don't own it. I'm not giving you ownership over it. Essentially, what are you? But you know what it's like? Oh, it's like, almost sounds like a trust, right? In other words, that son is creating the trust, right? See, he has like almost like a fiduciary responsibility over the property, but absolutely no ownership over it. So therefore, the Pumbedisayim say, there's no such mechanism like that in halacha. So telling someone to acquire something on the condition to go out and convey it to someone else doesn't work. Rav Nachman says, no, Kani, it works. Rabbi says it's fascinating. Why? The sudra Kani amanas lahaknosu. So I say this is absolutely fascinating. Rav Nachman says, Rabbi say it's no different than the sudra. Sudra is the handkerchief that is used by a Kenyan chalipin. Rabbi say, take a look again at the Ran. This time in the intermediate lines, second line into the intermediate wide lines, the hasudra kani amanas laknosu, the chiyov kone sudre lamakne. Supposed to listen to this. I'll give you a simple case. Right? There's Reuven and Shimon. So what happens? So Reuven wants to acquire Shimon's ox. So it is. Reuven wants to acquire Shimon's ox. Right? Shimon has the ox. So Reuven is the kona. Shimon is the makna. So what does Reuven do? So Reuven takes a handkerchief. So Abba says, so now they want to acquire. So Reuven can take a handkerchief, give the handkerchief to Shimon. Shimon lifts up the handkerchief, and when Shimon lifts up the handkerchief, what happens? Reuven acquires the ox. That is called a kinyan chalipin. Kinyan chalipin is literally again a flip or a swap act of acquisition. You acquire something of mine, I acquire something of yours. And you could use a handkerchief for that, a sudar. So I will say, very interesting. So I will say, so what happens? So Nachman says, I will say, so in this case over here, when Shimon takes Reuven's handkerchief and he lifts it up, look at the Ran. When the person acquiring gives his handkerchief to the person who's conveying, he doesn't get so listen to this. When Reuven gives Shimon the handkerchief, does Shimon get to keep the handkerchief? No. In fact, it's understood that after the transaction is complete, Shimon is giving the handkerchief back to Reuven. So I'll say, what do you see from here? You see from here that to acquiring something, acquiring something in order to acquire something else, right? Even though you don't get to keep the original item of acquisition, works. It works. So the Gemara says, no. Oman leimalon desudra itafis le milo mitzvahs. So I could very well be by the handkerchief, right? If Shimon goes ahead and decides to keep the handkerchief, could he keep the handkerchief? The answer is yes. I was supposed to say, technically speaking, the way Chalipin works is it's a flip act of acquisition. So even though it's uncommon, in other words, I should say, the common case is where Shimon gives back the handkerchief, but Lamaisa, if he didn't, it works. So I will say, that's different than our case, because in our case over here, son, right, thief's son, has absolutely no acquisition rights to the property. To which the Gemara says, Va'od, sudra kani amanas lahaknos, the kani min hashta li nechasin dahadein lemas kani. Supposed to listen to this. Va'od, sudra kani amanas lahaknos. It's true that I will say, whereas the handkerchief case, it's true that Reuven is giving Shimon the handkerchief on the condition ultimately again to acquire the kani min hashta. But remember the acquisition, right? Or I should say the transaction is happening right now. Halein nechasin dahadin le'emas kani. Rabbi say in this situation, in this case that we're dealing with over here with the father with the two sons, ultimately again, when is the property acquired? L'chihavi barbari tzura mirabanan. The property, the real acquisition, actually only acquires with the emergence of a grandson who's a Talmid Chacham. L'chihava hadir sudra l'marei. I will say at the end of the day, there's nothing left of the original transactional item by then. Amarle Rav Nachman, v'ha matnas beis charon, dekani amanas lahaknosu, v'lo kakani. So I will say, isn't the case in our Mishnah of the matnas beis charon? So I will say, the matnas beis charon, isn't that a case ultimately again of kani amanas lahaknos? Because I will say, what's happening over here? Going back to the Mishnah's case, what's happening over here? Son is saying to friend, what is son saying to friends, right? I'm giving you the gift. Why am I giving you the gift? So that my father should be able to partake. Isn't that a case of acquire so that you could give it to someone else? And yet what does the Mishnah say? It doesn't work. To which the Gemara says, "V'lo kakani zimnin amarle mishum desuudasa muchacha salav v'zimrin amarle." So we'll say there are two reasons why that case is different. That case is different because, again, I will say, once when the son is giving the gift, he makes a mention of the su'udah, then by definition, again, it's clear that it's a straw gift. The other possibility is the reason why it doesn't work. V'zin amarle Rabbi Eliezer he da'amar afilu vitur aser b'mudar hana. Rabbi say the other possibility is ultimately, again, that if you take a look, by the way, at the Ran, or 4 lines up from the bottom, V'zin amarle Rabbi Eliezer da'amar afilu vitur aser b'mudar hana lav d'shayachach din vitur ella. We'll say the idea over here is Rabbi Eliezer is the one who's machmir with Nedarim in general, and Rabbi Eliezer is the one who holds that this type of straw gift would not work. So we'll say, let's finish this up. Tnan, Amru Chachamim, Kol matana she'ena mikdisha te mikudeshes, eina matana. So we'll say, again, what do we say in the Mishnah? We'll say, how do you know if something is an effective gift? How do you know if it's an effective gift? If halacha l'maisa, you could receive a gift, and sanctify it, mekadesh it, that's an effective gift. That's an effective gift. Kol asuyemai, Rabbi say when it says kol matana, what does kol come to include? My lav la asuye, ha milsa, deshadja bekivi. So Rabbi say, is it not talking about this particular case of kani amanas lahaknos, that when you tell someone to acquire something on the condition to go ahead and give it to someone else? Are we not being taught that such a gift does not work? Rabbi say, why does such a gift not work? Because Rabbi say, if you're given a gift and you're told to acquire it, to give it to someone else, do you have the ability to be makdish that gift? Do you have the ability to be makdish? No. Why? Because you weren't given that right. So you see from the Mishnah, that's not an effective gift. To which the Gemara says, maybe not lishna. So the Gemara says, lo, lasui lishna basra dishmaite derava. Then Rabbi say, ultimately, again, it could be coming to include the following case. That ultimately, again, in the second version of Rava, where even if son says to friend, I'm giving you the gift, it's all yours, and please now, once it's yours, invite my father, that case also would not work. So I will say, so this is the end of the sugya. Quickly, how do we paskin? So there are two outline cases. So first, I will say, this case of Kani Almanas Lahaknos. So I will say, what do you do? This case with the father with the two sons, right? One son is a ganav, one son is good. So what does father want to do? Father's giving 50% of his estate to son, to good son, and now what he wants to do is give the other 50 to thief's son. But does he want thief's son to have it? No. But what does he want to leave the door open to? What does he want to do, right? If he has a grandson who's a Talmud Chacham. So essentially, can you give something to thief's son, telling thief's son, I'm only giving it to you so that you could convey it to someone else? So the Rambam, I'm sorry, Shulchan Aruch, Yaredeya, Siman Reish Chaf Gimel, Sif Gimel. Asr benome ana asa va'amar miye ben b'ni zetam tchacham yikne b'ni zenechasai kedei laknosim mino harizah ben asr b'nichsia'av uben haben mutter bahem im yetam tchacham kimashes. So we pass like Rav Nachman. And a gift of kani amanas lahaknos works. So if you give someone a gift, or really what you're doing is you're giving someone custodianship over something, but not that they should own it, but that they should simply hold it for someone else, such a gift actually works. So we'll say that's halacha l'maisa number 1, right? So that's why I pass him like Rav Nachman in this sugya. Then we'll say, what about again? Let's go back to the previous case. Let's finish up with this. What about our Suda case, right? Our Suda case, right? So how do we pass in the Suda case, right? Son made a neder, or father made a neder, however it is. Father can't get benefit from son. Son is making a chasana, right? He wants his father to come. Son wants to convey property to a third party in order that father could come. Is there a mutter way to do that? So say, listen to this. Rambam, Hilchos Nedarim, Perek Zayin Halacha Tesvav, Nasan le'echad matana. Son gives a gift to his friend. Va'amar lo, haresu dezunasuna lecha matana, v'yava ploni shu aser mani asi, v'yochal imanu, hareza aser. So I will say, if when son gives the gift, he says, friend, I'm giving you the gift, so that my father should come and eat with us, straw gift, doesn't work. V'lo od, elafil nasan lo stam, the chazan va'amar lo, ritzon chasheva ploni v'yochal imanu. Furthermore, even if son doesn't say anything, gives the gift, but after he gives the gift, say, you know, it'd be so nice if you invited my father. Also straw gift. Imochiach sofo al tchilasa shlanasan ela almanas shava ploni v'yochal aser. I will say, Raman Paskins, halacha l'maisa, the only way the gift works is if it's a bona fide gift. If in any way it's clear that the whole thing is a sham, just in order to go ahead and allow the father to come. The Rambam paskins, the gift will be null and void. I will say, Hadrin Allah HaShutfin, Mazel Tov, Shkoyach. Sure.